Today we are talking about the ACT reading section and specifically how to read really fast on the ACT reading section. I've had so many students express frustration and concern when they're taking the ACT reading section and saying, hey, I read through this whole passage. It took me too long. I couldn't get to all of the questions in that 35-minute time mark, and I'm not able to show everything I know. So I'm going to pull up this little tool I built called the Granite Reading Heat Map, and we're going to actually deconstruct some real ACT reading passages to see the information in these reading passages that's important, what we need to pay attention to, and the information that's not, the stuff that we can ignore, so that we can read through these passages faster, getting to all the key information and demonstrating everything we know. And by the way, if you're curious about this little heat map, maybe you're into data science, programming, check out the playlist that I am making super soon, all about technology, digital entrepreneurship, coding, all this cool stuff. So if you want to build some cool tech stuff on your own, I'm going to be teaching you guys how to do that in the playlist linked here. Okay, let's jump into it and see what is what on these ACT reading passages. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm about to pull up the heat map on our first reading passage. So I'm going to pull this up, but if you want to follow along with this, either you can join the ACT Everything course, it's linked here, and this will be practice test 1, or if you haven't done that, if you haven't signed up for ACT Everything course, but you still want to follow along, we have a link to just the test itself. It won't have all the cool stuff that the ACT Everything course has, but if you just want a copy of the test, that's going to be linked here below as well. So let's go ahead and we're going to just pull this test up and see what's going on here. So we've got question 1 right here, and then we've got question 2's appearing here, and we got 3 here, and there's question 4, here's question 5, and there's question 6, and here's 7. That's where 8 is. 9 is right about here, and there's 10. Okay, so now that we've heat mapped out this whole passage, we have an idea, right? This is basically a mapping of where the answers are to every question in this passage. And we can see that there are these areas, right? We've got this area right here near the bottom, near the end of the passage. And there's a lot of important stuff here. And you're going to notice that throughout a lot of these passages, the end often contains a lot of important stuff. So we want to definitely focus in here. But now we also have some passages, or sorry, not some passages, some paragraphs here where there's almost literally no information that we need to worry about. And that's going to be a theme that we see through a lot of these. But for now, here is the strategy I'm going to give you. When you're reading through these passages, you want to move quickly. You want to read fast, and you are going to have times where in certain paragraphs, you don't quite understand everything they're talking about. And when we're reading for school, right, and we read a paragraph and we don't really know what's going on, it's good to pause and to say, okay, I've got to figure out what's going on here. But when we take the ACT, almost the opposite rule applies. If you're a little confused on a paragraph, that's okay. Keep moving, because as you can see, many of these paragraphs are going to have almost no information in it at all that's really important to us. Now, this is not to say that you don't need to read the passages. I've heard a lot of ACT tutors tell their students, you don't even need to read the passage, just go straight to the questions. I've had so many students try that. It has never worked for people. If that has worked for you, comment. I'd love to know, but I've never seen it work for a student. You do need to read, but as you can see, evidenced by this first passage here, we can go kind of quick through it. So let's go ahead now to the next passage in this real ACT reading section and see what's going on with that one when we look at it through our Granite Reading Heat Map. So we've got question 1 right here, and then we've got question 2's appearing here, and we got 3 here, and there's question 4, here's question 5, and there's question 6, And here's 7. That's where 8 is. 9 is right about here. And there's 10. So we've heat mapped this whole thing out, and we can see some trends here. Again, we can see the end is really important. We can see some middle parts are important, but again, there are quite a few paragraphs that don't have any information. So this same rule applies here, right? When we're reading through, we want to move fast. And that means that if you read a paragraph and you're like, oh, what is going on here? I have no idea what they're talking about. That is fine. That does not mean you need to pause and go back and reread and reread and reread until you understand it perfectly. You don't have time for that, and that is the thing that slows down the most people. It causes the most issue for the most students. You're going to have time as you go through these through the questions, right? They're going to direct you to certain lines, and you're going to need to reread, and that's your opportunity to reread. But do not do that rereading as you're going through the passage, because you might end up burning a ton of time on some of these paragraphs, like the ones marked here, that have literally no questions associated with them. You're totally wasting time there, and you don't want to do that. So let's go through here, and we're going to actually look at the third passage on the ACT reading section that we're looking at here. So let's move over to that third passage. So we've got question 1 right here. And then we've got question 2's appearing here. Then we got 3 here. And there's question 4. Here's question 5. And there's question 6. And here's 7. That's where 8 is. 9 is right about here. And there's 10. Okay, so we've heat mapped out passage number 3, and the trend continues, right? A lot of important stuff in the last paragraph. So if, again, you don't understand the last paragraph, this is maybe the one exception for rereading. If you've read the last paragraph and you don't quite get it, just read it one more time, because you know reliably a lot of the big picture questions and a lot of the specific questions are going to be coming from that last paragraph. But for the rest of the test here, right, we can see, let's look at it. We've got these big chunks of text again that no questions are coming from, and we don't want to burn a ton of time looking at those paragraphs, rereading them, trying to decipher them, figure out the details of them when no questions are coming from these, right? It's just not worth it. And so with that, let's go ahead here and we're going to pull up the last of these passages here. So we've got question 1 right here, and then we've got question 2's appearing here. Then we got 3 here, and there's question 4. Here's question 5, and there's question 6, and here's 7. That's where 8 is. 9 is right about here, and there's 10. This is number 4. It's a natural science. Quick tip, natural science is always going to be your 4th on the ACT reading. So if you struggle with natural science or something, we're going to talk about that in another video. So please do subscribe so that you can watch my video all about that coming out soon. But here with this natural science passage, right now that we've outlined it, we've used the Granite Reading Heat Map on it, we can see the trend continues, right? This last paragraph, lot of important stuff here in this last paragraph. You got to understand that. But the rest of the paragraphs, some of them are important and some of them don't have anything at all that we need to pay attention to. Moreover, you can see here lines 15 to 25 and lines 45 through almost 60 in particular. They're throwing in a ton of big vocab, some really complicated stuff they're talking about. And it's cool stuff, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, hey, never read carefully again, right? When you're in school, you've got to read this stuff carefully. But for the ACT, for the sake of doing this really fast, it's cool stuff. But if you're a little fuzzy on it, you don't want to be burning a ton of time figuring out that vocab and chewing up all of this. You just want to read quickly through. And when people talk about skim reading, right, or when they talk about reading fast, it doesn't mean that they're not paying attention or that they're not looking for things. They are. You're reading, but you're letting go of that feeling of perfectionism. Like you need to read every single sentence perfectly. You're moving quickly, letting go some of the text. It probably means that you're reading And if, normally your reading level, when you decipher everything really carefully, it's like 100%, you're probably only going at about 60% of that careful reading. But that allows you to go way faster. So it makes a lot of sense for the ACT reading. Again, we don't want to do this for everything, right? If you're reading a book for fun, you don't want to read like that. It's not that fun. If you're doing work for school, don't read like that. You're going to miss stuff. But when we're doing time tests and we need to move really fast, this is the way to do it. So I hope that is really helpful to all of you. I hope you like the Granite Heat Map here. I think that's really cool. Like I said, we're going to be doing a lot more work with the Granite Reading Heat Map because it's a really useful thing to use. It's a really useful tool to understand a lot of different reading stuff, not just ACT reading. But if you need any more help with reading, check out Read, which is a mindfulness-based reading exercise to help people who maybe are finding that their mind's wandering off a lot when they're doing the ACT reading section. And also check out the ACT Everything course. It's linked below. It's a full ACT course. It's got, a lot of extra information on the reading section, on the English section, on the math section, on the science section, all of that good stuff. So make sure to check that out as well. And I will see everyone in our next video. Bye.